Hey adventurers, so today is going to be another book review. This is going to be for The Advent of Winter, a fantasy anthology, and this is by a whole 24 different self-published authors. And so yeah, let's talk about this. This is a fantasy anthology. It's got a whole bunch of stories set around the theme of winter. That's really the thing about this book that sets it apart. That this was the idea behind this was that these authors could each write a story surrounding the theme of winter and darkness and the dangers of winter and all that kind of stuff. And then they were going to release each of these books, each of these short stories for the first 24 days of December last year, so 2023. And so this was kind of acted as an advent calendar for these 24 stories, where you'd receive a new one in your inbox every day and you could read them on your phone every day, and then later on, once it all come out and the art and everything and the formatting of the book had all been accomplished, back to Kickstarter were able to receive their hard copy of the book itself. I believe the paperback is coming out fairly soon. I don't have the exact date that will be coming out, but I'm pretty sure that that's fairly soon. And so for those of you who haven't yet read it, this would be a perfect opportunity to do that, because the paperback copy is coming out soon. I don't know exactly when though. Alright, so let's see. The Advent of Winter is a fantasy anthology put together by Dom over at Dominish Books and contains 24 short stories by 24 different self-published authors. Since this is an anthology of short stories, inevitably every person will not like every story in the collection or in the anthology. I will add to that there were none in this book that I hated, that I despised, or that I thought, why do I have to read this one? There was something to each of them that I found enjoyable to some degree or another. Definitely some more so than others, but I'll talk more about that as I go. But yes, there were none that I hated and several that I absolutely loved. Most of them landed somewhere between the good to really good, not quite hitting great, but not being less than good. There was very few that were less than good, if any. I don't know that any of them were, but there were definitely some that strayed even into great for me. As far as actual thoughts on the stories, that's a little bit harder to do since I won't be talking about each individual story, but rather the book as a whole. And as such, I can't do much in terms of like reviewing the story, because there isn't a story through line to this anthology other than winter. That is the through line of this anthology. But rather I will be reviewing this book as a whole, as a fantasy anthology collection or fantasy anthology that has a whole bunch of different stories, and I won't be talking about each individual story, although I will mention some towards the end of the review. I'll talk about some of the ones that I felt like were my favorite, or some of my favorites for sure. First off, though, the fact that these are a whole bunch of self-published authors, including some that I consider friends, thinking specifically off the top of my head of Tori Tekken and Andrew D. Meredith. Those two, I think there's more, but those are the two that I'm remembering off the top of my head. And Dom wrote a story in here as well. Because I have some people that I am close to on BookTube, in this BookTube sphere, I was even more excited and even more wanted to come read this anthology and see what they were participating in. Immediately made me want to support this anthology more than I already did. But also, and this is arguably a little bit more important, the fact that this anthology centered itself around the theme of winter pushed me from, this is a really cool idea, to, I'm going to buy this, because winter is my favorite season, and as hard as winter can be, it's also extremely beautiful and opens up so many opportunities for different activities that you can do. I mean, we have the Olympics are split into summer and winter Olympics for a reason, because there's events, there's activities, there's sports that you can't do in the summer, and there's tons of them that you only can do in the winter. And so there's things like that. I don't need to really get into all of that, but because of that, just the idea of winter and having a fantasy anthology centered around that, I thought was a really cool idea. And I don't feel like I've read enough stories where the season, or especially winter as a season, becomes the focus of the story in the same way that it does with these. And something cool about each of these stories is, obviously each of the authors are different people, and so they approach this differently. And you can see how some of them, the winter affects the story more directly in some other stories versus in others, or some of them they just use that as a setting and stuff like that. And it's really cool the way each author was able to take this theme and turn it into something uniquely their own in order to tell the story that they wanted to tell. Is, to me, it was incredible. And seeing the ability for, we talk about this all the time, we talk about this idea of, if you give a whole bunch of people the exact same thing, tell them the exact same thing, or ask them the exact same question, or in this case give them the exact same prompt, each person is going to come up with their own answer, is going to come up with their own story that fits these prompts and is completely different from everybody else's. And that's exactly what we got with this. One author may take winter and use it as merely a setting or a backdrop for the story, and then another takes it and it becomes the driving force of the story, and yet a third uses it as a character in and of itself. And then of course another will use it as an obstacle or a challenge. I love this idea, and really the strength of anthologies, and this one especially, is in its variety, is the fact that they are so different from each story. And so you can enjoy the anthology as a whole, even if you have some stories that you didn't love in it. And then of course the fact that this anthology then has something tying each of the stories together, that really these stories don't go together in any way, shape, or form. They're not a series, they're not anything like that, but there is a way to tie them all together and make them understand why it's the advent of winter, because it's a whole bunch of stories about winter. And that's really cool. This is exactly what I was hoping would happen when I first heard about this anthology, when Dom first announced that he was doing this. I wanted to see the authors playing with a central theme, meaning winter in this case, and telling their own stories within the parameters given. And I wanted to be immersed in winter. Some stories did just that, and me having lived in Alaska my entire life, I understand winter and I love winter, and I know a lot of people don't who live in Alaska, but for me winter is as much a part of me as anything else. And so just seeing the way that they were able to adapt winter into stories was really cool. We also get some fantastic world building. Characters, monsters, ideas, themes, questions, magic, and so much more. Occasionally even the promise of a new series. There's, I think, several that are in existing that take place in existing series or existing worlds, but some that as soon as the authors wrote these, they're like, oh, I want to write a series in this world. I now have a story idea that I want to write and expound upon beyond just this short story. These are the things that really made me enjoy this experience so much. Of course, being able to be in the community and being partaking of these stories every day as they came out. I couldn't keep up with them. I couldn't read one a day like some of the people could, but I tried to keep up as best as I could, and I tried to read a little bit at least of the stories each day in November so that I could, or in December, so that I could go through and just enjoy the stories for what they are and also be part of the conversation. And that was really fun. That was really cool. The way, the delivery of this story, the fact that it did act as an advent calendar, and it was just a really cool experience getting to experience this anthology in that way. I will leave you with this warning though. Just as winter is dark and dangerous and deadly, so are these stories. There's very little joy that is not tempered by bleakness in some way. So yes, I do recommend this anthology, but don't expect it to be all warm and Christmassy, because it is anything but that, and that's okay. I'm okay with that, and I expected that, and I knew that to be the case. But if you're going into this anthology thinking, oh, this is going to be a fun Christmas read, yeah, it is fun. It's a lot of fun, but it is not Christmassy. It is not the warm, fuzzy feelings that you get with Christmas. This is the cold, bleak harshness of winter. And also don't go into it expecting to enjoy every story, but find the ones that you do enjoy, because you will enjoy some. I fully believe that there is something for everybody in this anthology. And that's really cool to be able to say. As I close out here, I want to just list a few of my favorites from this story, or from this anthology, or a few of the things that really stood out to me. Obviously, I do need to shout out Dom McDermott, who was the one who put this anthology together and released his debut short story in this Fantasy Anthology. And so this, I believe it's the 16th story in this anthology, is his, and just a huge shout out to him, because that's a huge accomplishment and super cool that he was able to do that. Plus he wrote a good short story. So yeah, so obviously I'm gonna shout him out real quick here. But then also The Patchskin Woman by Cal Black. That's, I believe, the very first one that you read. I loved that one. Rite of the Tundra by Jim Wilborn is another one really early on. Frosted Embers by L.L. McRae. Cold Silver for Souls by Tori Tekken. A Cold Broad River by Tim Hardy. Three Bells to Midnight by Kirsten Espinosa Rosero. Those are just some of the ones. Of course, there's 24, so it's really hard to pick and choose actual favorites when you have 24 stories to pick through. But there was a lot that really stood out, and those are not all of them. The ones that I listed are not all of them, but those are some that I really ended up enjoying and appreciating what they were doing with those stories. So that is my review of The Advent of Winter, a fantasy anthology. Thank you guys for watching. Please, if you haven't looked into this at all yet, please do so, because there is some really fantastic stuff going on in this anthology. And I know at least Tori, A Cold Silver for Souls, that story is getting its own series, and I'm very excited for that. Plus so many of the others I just really want to go read more by these authors now, because I feel like what I saw with their short story tells me that I want to read more of what they write. And so that's, of course, that's the goal with something like this, is to make you want to read more authors writing. And so please go check out this anthology if you haven't already, and we'll see you guys again soon. Stay warm.